So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for our interview with Holly-Ann Martin. Holly-Ann is the Managing Director of Safe for Kids, and we're really excited to have Holly-Ann with us today. She does some tremendous work, particularly in Indigenous communities, so very excited to hear about that. So, Holly-Ann, can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you actually first became involved in child protection?
Well, I was working as a teacher assistant, and even before protected behaviours came to Australia, we always knew that children with special needs were at higher risk of being abused than mainstream children. So we'd always taught public and private and different aspects of the program. But then in the late 80s, I was at a school where there was a critical incident, and we were one of the first schools in Western Australia trained in protective behaviours. So for 25 years, I basically taught it to the children that I was working with. And the last school before I left, the principal was very progressive, and she would have me go into 3 schools and teach protective behaviours. And then I went up in 2007, I went up into the Kimberley because some horrific abuse was all over the front page of our local paper. And I just went up in my long service leave and then saw a huge need for resources. So I quit my job, took a $250,000 loan out of my home, and basically have been doing it full time ever since.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you. That's such an insight. And protective behaviours really was groundbreaking for Australia, wasn't it? Like at that time, it was, yeah.
Well, yeah, and to be honest, people still talk about stranger danger because it's easier. And because of the internet, we do have to go back to the old stranger danger messages as well.
Yeah.
But, most sexual abuse is by people that are known and loved by children. So it was very groundbreaking. And unfortunately, though, some states are still teaching protective behaviours like it was the 80s. But, because of my experiences and the fact that when we don't have COVID, I get to stand in front of about 4,500 children every year on average.
Wow.
From 3 to 17, children tell me stuff, and then I go, oh gosh, I need to write a book about that, or I need to make a resource about that, because there was no TikTok around back in the 80s.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, times change, risks change, obviously. And I guess considering the people safety risks facing children today, statistics like I was having a look at your website recently, and I certainly agree with this one. I think it was a Frida Briggs quote that about a third of children will suffer from sexual abuse before they hit their 18th birthday, which is a devastating statistic. So bearing that in mind, clearly we're not doing a great job as a community to keep children safe. So what would be your best advice for parents and carers to protect their own children?
Well, to educate themselves, the internet has made it so much easier for people to groom children. And, and one of the things that I'd like parents to do is not to tell their children to go and Google it, because, kids are hearing stuff in the playground, and then, parents are busy. So they say, I'll go and Google it. And then the kids are coming across pornography and terrible things. Parents, I've just been down south and done several parent workshops, and one parent workshop it was a daytime one, and we only had 10 parents. The evening one, we only had 15 parents for the whole of Albany, which is it's a huge country town. I think over 25,000 people there, and yet it went out to every school, and yet parents aren't knowing the dangers. And one of the parents came up and said, Holly, she was the catalyst that got me down there, because several years ago she had come to a workshop and was teaching the program, and then her daughter actually disclosed some stuff, and she said, I've been pushing to get you back, because I never thought it would happen to me. I never thought this would happen to my daughter. And it's not until it does. But if we could be teaching this before the bad thing happens, then, maybe it won't happen. Or if it does happen, children will have the tools to be able to tell us sooner.
Yeah, well said. So I guess that's parents. It's really important for them to be aware of risks. What about teachers? And I know you've done a lot of work, you do a lot of work with teachers, you have resources for teachers. What's a teacher's role in this space?
Lots of teachers say it's a parent's job, but when we consider most abuse happens in the home, not necessarily by parents, but it has to be the child, school and the parents all working together to keep kids safe. Now, in every state in Australia, there is a protective behaviours program, depending on what people are calling it. It's a child abuse program. But a lot of teachers are only teaching what they feel comfortable with. And for instance, my favourite book ever written was Everyone's Got a Bottom, and we sell it. The amount of teachers that have bought that book and then tried to return it saying, oh, Holly, I couldn't possibly read that to my, 6-year-olds. And my argument to that is, no, I'm not returning it, because if you can't say penis and vagina, how can we expect a 6-year-old to say it? And so, teachers will teach about a network or, early warning signs or feelings, but our program goes so much deeper, and we basically say, unless you are talking about grooming, child-to-child sexual abuse, pornography is the hugest one, cyber safety, we have to have, and consent, we have to have these uncomfortable conversations now. Consent got very political at the beginning of the year. We've been talking about consent forever, and yet all of a sudden, oh my gosh, there's this revolutionary new thing. Let's talk to kids about consent. And I quite often cop flack on my Facebook group when I talk, in my Facebook page, when I talk about consent, people saying, oh, you're a sicko talking to, children about consent. It's not about sex, it's about body autonomy. It's about they're the boss of their body. And so if we can grow little ones up knowing that, then by the time they're, in a relationship, they will know what they'll accept and what they won't accept.
Absolutely. No, fantastic points. That's I think there is a image that people, or a thought that a lot of parents and teachers have, that when we talk about body ownership, that they are thinking we're talking about the intricacies of sexual relationships and the act of sex itself. And it's so simple, isn't it? It's parts of the body that are private, parts that are public, rules about private parts of the body. And what do we do if someone breaks those rules? Like, it's
Exactly. Public and private was actually never a part of the original protective behaviours that came to Australia. But I'd always taught it because of, my experience working with kids with special needs. So I've incorporated pornography. I don't call it pornography with 6-year-olds. And I believe that we need to start talking to 6-year-olds about private pictures and private movies. When I brainstorm with children, where might you see them? 5 and 6-year-olds can tell me TikTok's first, YouTube second, and then they just rattle all of the places off. I don't put those words in their mouth. They know where you can see these images.
Yeah.
But when we incorporate it, and I teach it with sign language, so we have our 2 hands apart, and that's the sign for public. So you 2 hands apart and you move them away from each other. And then the sign for private is your hand in front of your mouth, because your mouth is a private part. And then you pretend you've got a key and you're locking your lips. And so we talk about, what to do if you see private pictures or private movies. It's not about frightening children. The kids are seeing it, and then they're having flashbacks and nightmares. So I found myself having to write a children's book about child-to-child sexual abuse, because I had a principal ring me, ironically from Queensland, looking for resources, because he had had 6 separate cases of children touching other children at his school. And so I wrote a book, and it gives kids 5 private rules. No one's allowed to touch your private parts unless it's for medical reasons or hygiene, but that adult has to get your consent. And if it happened to you, it wouldn't be your fault. You are not allowed to touch anybody else's private parts. If you do, you're breaking the law. No one's allowed to show you private pictures. No one's allowed to take private pictures of you, and you're not allowed to take private pictures of yourself. Kids, Kim, if give a kid a rule, that's the rule. And if anybody breaks the rule, there's no grey areas. It's not blaming or naming or shaming. It's just simply, and that's what teachers and parents both need to do, is give kids straight messages, because we give kids mixed messages all the time. Don't talk to strangers, and then we chat to the person behind us in the Coles line. Or, we make children kiss everybody goodbye at a party. Well, we don't know if everybody at the party is a safe person. And so, I need parents to advocate for children. And if their child doesn't want to kiss a grandparent or somebody goodbye, then that's okay.
Absolutely. I think that's fundamental, isn't it? And having those alternatives, the high fives, the knuckles, the waving, a verbal dialogue. There's so many.
The elbow bump now. There's an elbow.
The COVID elbow bump. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking about pornography, it's really easy these days for children to access. What is your advice for parents and teachers, I guess, about managing that? And I guess being aware of what children are likely doing, but being able to have those conversations with children. What should that conversation look like?
Simply saying to children, if you see pictures or moves of people with no clothes on, come and show me. Now, I used to say, come and tell me, until April last year. I had somebody tag me into child exploitation material on Instagram. They'd come across a heinous video, didn't know how to handle it, so they put at Safe for Kids, which is me, at FBI, at Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, which is eventually where it will go. But I just get this random message. I click on it, it opens up, and I just burst into tears. I could not believe the heinous acts that I was seeing.
Oh, dear.
But because I teach this stuff all the time, and so I had enough wherewithal to go and take a screenshot of the man's face, but not what he was doing to the children, a screenshot of his Instagram account. I go back out to take a screenshot of the person who tagged me, but it had disappeared.
Oh, dear.
I then go online to the Federal Police and make my report, and, through my tears, I'm typing it all out, and he was doing this, and I've got photos, by the way, and I hit send. Then I go up into our house because my office is in the bottom of my garden, and I explained to my husband exactly what I saw. And through my tears, I'm sobbing and saying, and this happened. And at the end of it, I finished, and my husband goes, oh, yeah? Like, what do you mean, oh, yeah? I'm nearly hysterical, and all you're giving me is, oh, yeah? But I look at it as horrible as it was, I look at it as a gift, because if I can't articulate to my husband what I saw, how is a child supposed to articulate to their parents? Absolutely. And if they say, I saw naked pictures, that's not what they saw.
No. Oh, that's such a really incredible example to demonstrate why it's important to see what they're seeing.
Yeah. So you have to show an adult. And so a lot of people don't, know how to start the conversation. So I, in fact, wrote 2 books to help adults talk to children about pornography, and then we sell about another 4, 2 from the US and 2 from that were written in Australia.
What are the names of your 2?
So Hayden Reese Learns What to Do If You See Private Pictures and Private Movies, and my latest one is Someone Should Have Told Me, and it's the first one is a social story, but the second one is basically, somebody should have told me not to type private words into the computer. Somebody should have told me not to talk to people on the internet, even if they look nice. So it's to cover all aspects of cyber safety. And it's to help parents have those conversations. If they don't know where to start, I've given them the words of how to start the conversation, basically.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I agree with you. I'm just thinking back what you were saying about Everyone's Got a Bottom being such a great teaching tool. That's my go-to as well. But I think using books, it creates, it doesn't then rely wholly and solely on the parent, the carer, the teacher to come up with it. They just need to convey that, I guess, in that safe environment, and be there and looking at the response of children, and be able to, see how it might be impacting on them and respond as they need to.
But also, we know with boys especially don't like face-to-face stuff. They like side-by-side stuff. So if a parent is reading it, a lot of parents say, what if I get it wrong? What if I give my kid too much information? What? Do you know what? It's reading the book. And because all good books written for child protection have so much information in the back of the book about the conversation starters and questions and stuff like that, you can't get it wrong. But when a child's lying down, snuggled in their bed, or sitting side by side, it's not as daunting for children to hear it and basically start the conversation. You can't mess it up.
Yep. Very interesting that they're the side-by-side with boys. That's a really great tip, I think, for people watching. Yeah, that's great. So, Holly-Ann, you have developed lots of resources for children, for parents, for teachers. I guess some of the most engaging that I found, and I love all of your work, is the songs you do, the safety songs, so conveying children's safety messages through songs. And I was watching some of your videos just last night, actually, and particularly in Indigenous communities, and using the sign language with the song just to really, and these big smiley faces of kids, and clearly they're getting it. So I wanted to ask you, how do you find, I guess the way that children learn, do songs help from your experience?
Definitely. People say, Holly, why does your program work especially so well in remote communities? Stories, songs, and sign language. 300 years ago, how were we conveying messages? Stories, songs, and sign language. And music is such a, I'll walk out into the playground and the kids don't know I'm there, and it just lifts my heart because I'll hear them singing, either because I've got 14 songs that I've had written, plus the 9 that we've written in remote communities. And I tell you what, when you walk around a corner of a building and the kids are out singing, everyone has the right to feel safe, in their play.
Yeah.
And because they're very, they're earworms, let's face it, they get stuck in your ear, and I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning singing them every now and then. That's what you want. If we could have, songs with good, healthy messages, because, when you look at some of the rappers and some of the lyrics that they have, there's, they're demeaning to women and, all horrible things. I don't understand why we're not, helping have better, messages shared, because subliminally it helps. One of my goals is, I've got on my bucket list, I want to get hold of Tim Minchin, because I've half written a song called I Won't Be Your Porn Star for teenage young girls.
Oh,
and I'm hoping to sit next to him on a plane or something.
Oh, wouldn't that be fabulous?
Because he's such a great, his lyrics are fantastic. But just, for young girls, like, you don't have to do some of the things that people are seeing in porn, because our teenagers believe that that's what everybody does. And when I'm working with teenage young men, they admit to me of watching 2 hours a week of pornography. And when I say, fellas, why would you look at that? Oh, to learn technique, miss, to learn style.
Wow.
They can stop you right there. Not the right technique and there's no style. But there's no kissing, there's no foreplay, there's no pleasure for women. 88% of pornography that is produced now is violence against women, and we wonder why DV's on the increase. It's easy.
Yeah.
And so if we could have messages about what a healthy relationship looks like for our teenagers, and don't settle, we need good messages like that getting out, and music is such a great way to hit the mark.
Absolutely. So in Indigenous communities, you've just shared that it's stories, songs, and sign language that gets through. When we've spoken previously, you've mentioned some of the terminology that can change a bit. So I'm just thinking, for people who are working or living in Indigenous communities, what are some of the key messages that, or some of the terminology that I guess kids might not understand, and what would you suggest as replacements?
The main one is grooming, because of Aboriginal people's life experience. Well, in fact, even a lot of people don't understand grooming anyway, but I call it friending them up. And I'm going to actually I need to write some new resources around grooming for children. And I'm even going to use the terminology friending them up for online grooming for them. But when I've been out bush talking with local people, adults have been caught up in, I know of a couple of ladies that have been caught up in Nigerian scams where they've been sending men, money to men. A young fella that got caught up in a Filipino scam, 22 years of age, thought he had a girlfriend, took a picture of his private part, had to send money. But children are even more easily groomed because they're playing games, and people are grooming them, but also giving them money through the gaming that they're doing. So like they'll give them so many V-bucks if they send a naked picture and things like that. Yeah. So parents aren't, if a child received a pair of Nikes in the mail, the parent would go, where did you get these from? But in the games, the parents don't know that they're getting these virtual dollars. Yeah. So talking about grooming, I think is something that we haven't done well. And because I read an article the other day that in the UK, they've said that grooming has gone up 70% because of COVID. So yeah,
Wow.
so it's been a real wake up call for me. So I need to write more resources. I did if people are interested, I recently did on my Facebook page, the activity that I do when I'm talking with both kids in mainstream and in remote communities around grooming. And I use a video from the UK, which is about a little girl that goes into a virtual world, and it just shows grooming so beautifully. But when I used this in a very remote community earlier in the year, only 8 children in this school, a 10-year-old on the Monday told me how he had a friend in Mexico, a kid he was playing Fortnite with. On the Wednesday, we learned about early warning signs. On the Thursday, I showed them this video about grooming and friending them up and stuff. And on the Friday, this young fellow, 10 years of age, comes, Holly, you know my friend from Mexico? I don't think that's a kid. I think that's a grown-up. He's starting to talk dirty way. He wants me to send naked pictures. That's that grooming you were talking about, wasn't it, Holly? And he worked it out himself. Yeah, yeah. So
My goodness, what incredible timing for your lesson. That's yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, so friending them up, that's great. And I'm thinking of particularly teachers, police, health workers in Indigenous communities. What advice would you give them generally, I guess, about how to be proactive in protecting kids in the community, which I guess may be talking to kids directly, it may be putting in place other protective factors? Any thoughts there?
It's not just those people, it's everybody in a community. We have to teach people how to receive a disclosure from a child.
Yeah.
One of the most proudest things that I do is I have run over 70 workshops now with solely Aboriginal men, talking about pornography and the effects of their brains and on children's brains. And the men say, Holly, we like you because you tell us straight way, and they're our kids too, and we need to know this stuff. But at the end of all of my talks, wherever I go, I actually, teachers will have done MANT reporting training, but in my experience, we don't actually give people a script of what to say. So I was in a very remote community in the Central Desert, and I had 32 men after football training all sitting around a room. Wow. And there was a big, strong dad, and he was joking and asking great questions. So I knew he'd be really, really receptive. So I went up to him and said, look, I want to do a play for the men, and will you help me out? And he's gone, yeah, Holly, no worries. And all I said to him was, I'm going to pretend to be your 9-year-old daughter. Now, I'm old enough to be his mother, but now I'm going to be his 9-year-old daughter. And I went up and I said, Dad, that boy next door, he'd been larrikin with me. He'd been touching me down there. He'd been touching my vagina. And this guy, I won't use the swear words that he actually said, but he was really, I'm going to kill him, and he's swearing and, acting up big time. And I said, freeze. I said, I love my dad, and that's why I keep that story to myself. What you got to say is, Bub, I'm glad you told me. I believe you. It's not your fault. Yeah. And I'm going to do something about it. The men are all just sitting around the room nodding with their mouths open going, we get it now, Holly. I said, fellas, you go out bush and you do whatever you have to do to let that anger out, but you can't show that to your baby. Yeah. We need them to stay calm, because even if an adult goes, they'll stop the child from telling them. Yeah. So, then we have to follow the procedures. So report it to the police and things like that. Don't ask any leading questions. Yeah. Child Protection Week next week, and I've actually, I'm working on a free flyer that'll go up telling everybody exactly what to do, and I'm hoping that people will photocopy it and stick it up at the doctor's surgery and stick it up everywhere, because you never know. And parents say to me, Holly, if anything happened to my child, they would tell me, and we know that that's not true. A child is more likely to tell their best friend's mum or a teacher and things like that. But everybody in a community, whether it's a remote community or mainstream, needs to know, just in case, because they'll all be. I've actually stopped calling it a network. I call it a safety team. Everybody will be on a child's safety team. So they need to know, heaven forbid, should a child tell them something, what to do, and we have to believe children. The amount of parents that have come up after workshops and said, Holly, look, I wish I had have had that when I was a child. I told blah, 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 and nobody listened to me. So we have, children don't lie about this stuff. The statistics show us that most minute amount of children that might lie about it. We just have to believe children and trust that the police will investigate and will get the results that we need.
Absolutely. Now, there was a term that you used in there that I think is good to, I guess, get some better understanding. You'd be larrikin with me when you're doing the role play. Can you share a bit more about that one? Yeah.
So Central Desert Kids, and this is really pertinent actually, because I promote the Kids Helpline a lot, and they rang me one day saying, look, Holly, we love the work, but we've never talked with Central Desert Kids before, and now all your kids are ringing us. We don't know how to talk with them. And I said to them, if your staff had a call and a child said he's been larrikin with me or he's been cheeky with me, would your staff know what it meant? And they said no, that we would just think they were being teased. But that is how a Central Desert Kid, that's how they describe sexual abuse, is being larrikin.
Wow.
So, I mean, talking about playing it down. And so I'm not sure if it's a term used up in Queensland, but definitely in the Northern Territory, that's how, and being cheeky, the kids talk about cheeky dogs, which is vicious dogs.
Right.
So, those quirky little, like you said before, the language, you have to, and each area has got like a term they use up in the Kimberley is humbugging, which means pestering or nagging. And so, people might humbug children to keep them quiet. So I'm really lucky the communities that I go in, and I've been in over 70 remote communities across Australia. I work very closely with the teacher assistants because white fella teachers come and go, but the teacher assistants, and they quite often say, Holly, give us a list of those words and we're going to translate it into language. So another proud moment I had was walking into a remote community that I hadn't been to before, and on the wall is my feelings poster, but the next community over had translated it into Warlpiri. So it's got the English word at the top and the Warlpiri word at the bottom. So they're taking ownership of it, and that's what we need. We need local people valuing it and wanting to keep it, running. So, working with all people. I won't go into a community unless it's a whole of community approach.
Yep.
Because it's not up to 5 and 6 year olds to keep themselves safe. It is our job as adults.
Yeah.
But for me, children are the last line of defence. So that's why, if I'm in a community, police, health, childcare, youth workers, every NGO is trained.
Yeah.
So that they know the language that the kids will be using, and they'll know how to receive a disclosure.
Fantastic. Amazing. Now, you've mentioned Kids Helpline, and as you said, you call it a safety team. Other programs call it safety network. There's different terms, but we're talking about 5 trusted people or organisations who children can approach if they feel unsafe, if they have a problem, who will listen to them, believe them, and help them to get help. So Kids Helpline is a fantastic inclusion for a safety team member. What is your advice to kids about accessing Kids Helpline?
I spend a lot of time on this with children, and especially my bush kids, because, if a child's abused in Alice Springs, for instance, they can go to SARC, they can go for counselling, even though there's usually a 9-month wait for different counselling services across Australia. But for desert kids, but also mainstream kids, yourself, Kim, sometimes if you've got a problem, it's easy to tell a total stranger if you don't have to look at them. And so I spend a lot of time promoting the Kids Helpline. I go through and on my website, I've got a list of, that it's 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year, and there's loads and loads. I could do a whole section. Well, it's on my YouTube channel of how I exactly do it with children. Yeah. But I physically, with every class I work with, for grade 3s upwards, we physically ring the Kids Helpline. And at the end of the lesson, the kids go, Miss, that was the best thing about everything that you've taught us, because I can tell you something, but by physically ringing it, the kids get the experience, because you don't always get through straight away. The longest I've had to wait is 45 minutes. Now, recently, because of so many states are now back in lockdown, it's been so much harder for me to get through, even though they've had an increase in staff. So there used to be 130 different counsellors, and now there's about 230 different counsellors. But I'm still having to wait a long time. Kids can email them and they can message them. However, I don't encourage that because they get so many contacts a day, and about half are either emailing or messaging. If a child emails, it could take more than a week for them to get their email answered. So I just want them to pick up the phone and have a talk.
Yeah.
But the beauty with the Kids Helpline is if you worked at the Kids Helpline and I like you, I can keep asking for your name. I don't have to tell my story to every man and his dog. If I need ongoing counselling, I can arrange it, say at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, I'm going to ring and speak to you.
That's fantastic.
And because it's from 5 to 25, if I'm 10 and I contact you, I can keep ringing you until either you leave the Kids Helpline or the day I turn 26.
Yep.
And there'll never, ever, well, let's face it, there'll never be two Kims. But if it, you know, Kim's quite a common name. If another Kim joined, they would be known as a different name. So it can never get mixed up.
Oh, that's fantastic to know. I wasn't aware of that ability to access that same person. So that's excellent. And to be able to schedule in. Yeah, because I was wondering, you were saying that you can ask for that person, but to, I guess, have that pre-arrangement when, you know, they know their roster, you know, when you're available. That's excellent. So bearing in mind everything you have said, if there is one thing, or I guess, you know, some key points that you would like everyone who watches this or listens to this interview to do, what would that be?
Be a child's Google. If I'm holding my mobile phone and talking to you, you're not the most important person in this conversation. This is.
Yep.
So the reason I say be your child's Google is, you know, I want to open up conversations with children. Parents need to have that. And you know yourself, people that prey on children look for vulnerable children and available children, kids that don't have connections. When I'm helping kids make up a safety team, I have kids in every class that I do this, doesn't matter where I do it, mainstream or in communities, I have kids saying, I don't want anybody from my family on my safety team. Mum's always on Facebook, or Dad comes to my cricket match and he never watches. So, you know, make time to have conversations with your children. Don't ever tell them to go and Google it, because there's some heinous things that kids are hearing in the playground, and then they're Googling it, and they, you know, their whole lives are being destroyed from what they're seeing.
Yeah.
So I need parents to, you know, make time, have those conversations, tell their children, you can tell me anything. Nothing that you'll ever tell me will stop me loving you. Kids need to hear that a million times.
Yeah.
Because if a child's suspended from school and a parent goes crook at them, what are the chances of coming home and saying, Mum, I'm pregnant, I've got a girl pregnant, or I'm on drugs? We can say, I'm disappointed in your behaviour, but I still love you, and you can tell me anything, and nothing you'll tell me will stop me loving you. Because people that prey on children will be telling them, you know, lies like nobody's going to love you, or you'll get taken away, or all of these things. And these are the sorts of resources that I need to write around grooming, because all of those things are keeping kids quiet. But we need children to know they can tell a trusted adult.
Fantastic advice, Holly. That's brilliant. So for people, if they're wanting to look at some of the resources that we've spoken about, can you plug your web address for us?
So it's just safe, the number 4 kids, .com.au. I've got a Facebook page, which is Safe for Kids as well. And also a YouTube channel where I've got loads and loads of free information for parents and teachers, but also that's where the songs all hide. Well, they're not hiding. Hopefully people will go on and have a look at the children's songs, because they are just so good, especially the consent song. When the government released that terrible video about milkshake and consent, I was interviewed on the ABC in Alice Springs, and they played that 2 minutes of that and then 2 minutes of the children's songs, and said, why can our Central Desert kids get it so right and the government get it so wrong?
Oh, wow.
I know,
Yeah.
but all of the songs, as you've seen, have really good, clear messages for children.
Absolutely. Well, Holly-Ann, it has been such a pleasure to speak with you today. And thank you so much for the incredible contribution that you make to keeping kids safe.
Thank you.